Hello, this is Earl Purdy,
and Anna Kujawa.
and we're ready to do some more Course in Miracles.
Yes, indeed.
A Course in Right Perception.
Yeah.
And we just studying the way we study, and hopefully it will be helpful to you in your studying. And just remember that the attitude that Anna and I have is we don't have to believe it, we don't have to accept it, we don't have to welcome it. Some of it's hard to believe and startling, but we use the ideas. That's what we focus on.
That's our goal.
That's what the Course told us to do.
Yep.
So,
and we are in the Teacher's Manual.
Teacher's Manual.
And we are in the section called Are Changes Required in the Life Situations of God's Teachers?
And we are using the Course in Miracles, the Foundation for Inner Peace version of it.
Indeed.
So, changes required. So I'm going to read it, and then Anna's going to tell me what she heard, and then I'll add anything that comes to me to share, and then Anna's going to read it, and then I'll tell her what I heard, because we don't believe in analyzing the Course. We believe in remembering what we're being told and then doing it.
Yes.
It's really radical way to approach the Course, but that's the way we do it.
That's right. That's our ACIM MO.
That's right.
All right. So would you like me to read to you first, or you want to read
I'll
first?
read first.
Okay, great.
Changes are required in the minds of God's teachers. Changes are required. These changes may or may not involve changes in the external situation. Remember that no one is where he is by accident, and that means chance plays no part in God's plan. So it's most unlikely that changes in attitude wouldn't be the first step in the newly made teacher of God's training. There is, however, no set pattern, since training is always highly individualized. There are those who are called upon to change their life situations almost immediately. But these are generally special cases. By far, the majority are given a slowly evolving training program in which as many previous mistakes as possible are corrected. Relationships in particular must be properly perceived, and all dark cornerstones of unforgiveness removed.
Yes.
Otherwise, the old thought system still has a basis for return. Okay, Anna, tell me what you heard.
I will tell you
I'm
what
going
I
to
heard.
double check and make sure everything's okay.
All right.
Okay, great. All right, good.
All right. So what I heard, the question in the teacher's manual is, are changes required in the life situations of us, God's teachers? And remember, the Course says that anybody who has ever one time seen someone else's interest as not separate from their own has become a teacher of God, which is to me, that's another word for healer. A teacher of God, a healer, someone who's decided to be helpful. So, and our change is required in the life situations of us, God's teachers. Well, changes are required in our minds, in the minds. Now, changing your mind may or may not involve changes in your external circumstances. So maybe it will, maybe it won't. But the thing we're supposed to remember is no one is where they are by chance or accident. No chance plays any part in God's plan. So yes, changes are required in your mind first. It may extend to a change in your external situation, but it's most likely that the first change that's required of you is a change in attitude. Okay. And that's the first thing that is probably going to be the first step in the Teacher of God's training program. But what does it say? That there's no set pattern, because the training program for every teacher of God is highly individualized. So that's a thing that is very important to know. First thing that really is required is a change of attitude, change of mind. But there's no set pattern. Every teacher of God has a highly individualized curriculum. So a training. So that's good to know. So don't be comparing your training program with someone else's training program as a teacher of God, as a healer, because every healer's training program is highly individualized. So, but it's safe to say that most people have to start with a change in their attitude. Then it says, now there are those who are called upon to change their life situation almost immediately, but that's generally special. Like me, I was called upon to change my life situation.
Yeah, you made a big shift when you got into the course.
Almost immediately.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you've made an immediate life situation change when your family freaks out.
That's your clue.
And tries to have you reprogrammed or deprogrammed.
Deprogrammed. That's right. Yeah.
So that's your clue. And but by far the majority of teachers of God are given a slowly evolving training program. So that's what most of us have, a slowly evolving training program. And what's a training program? What's the training program for the teachers of God? Well, it's a program in which as many previous mistakes as possible are corrected. So that's what our training program is about. Slowly, correcting as many of our previous mistakes as possible. Like what previous mistakes?
That's right. What do you mean? I don't even have any previous mistakes to even be corrected.
Well, he's talking about your previous relationship mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
As many of your previous relationship mistakes as possible.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be corrected, and for most of us, that's going to be a slowly evolving process.
Yes.
Not because our teacher is in any way limited, but because we are kind of slow. So we are given a slowly evolving training program where as many of our past relationship mistakes are corrected. Now, why is it that our previous relationship mistakes are targeted first for correction?
Why?
The reason is because your previous relationship mistakes is where all your dark cornerstones of unforgiveness are hanging out.
Dark cornerstones, is that a racist statement?
Probably.
Okay. I'm still in America.
Here's another previous mistake that needs to be corrected.
That's right.
Speaking of previous errors, relationship errors that need to be corrected.
That's right. Hey. Dark cornerstones.
Dark cornerstones.
All right, okay.
Yes. So all those previous relationship mistakes, which, I look back, I'm like, oh, it seems like they're all mistakes. They have got to be correctly perceived, in particular in your teacher training program, because that's where all the dark cornerstones of unforgiveness are, and so that's where those mistakes have to be removed. Now, if your training program doesn't go first for our previous relationship mistakes and get those corrected first, then the old thought system still has a basis for return.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a cleaning out that has to happen at the beginning of the training program of the teacher of God. It's like, your first semester.
Okay.
And so that the old foundation isn't still there, so that a new foundation can be built.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, I'm really good at doing a slowly evolving training program. So I'm glad that's what it is. I need a slowly evolving program.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's right. We need to learn. We need to practice forgiving our past relationship mistakes over years instead of we could do it right now.
That's right.
This instant,
That's right.
say, wow. I do not understand anything that occurred. I do not understand what any of those relationships meant because I did not understand my own best interest, and I could be done with it.
And I need to recognize that if I were to have all unforgiveness removed, that is now properly perceiving the relationship.
That's exactly right.
And unforgiveness is all forms of misperception.
That's right.
I just need to have my misperceptions
of all my past relationships corrected.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. It's, you know, what's happening to me so much now after having studied the course for, you know, 3 decades is that, which means I've been very successful at a slowly evolving training program. Speaking of, I am a very good student. I do slowly evolving really well. You know, it's like the simplicity of it. I keep seeing more and more how my ego put layers on top of what the course is saying to distort what I was looking at, because I always see contained within every paragraph everything about what it's talking about in that paragraph.
That's
like
right.
when he says relationships in particular must be properly perceived. What does that mean? All dark cornerstones of unforgiveness removed. That's all. That's all the relationship properly perceived means, is that I've let go of my unforgiveness. And then he says, well, and if you don't do that, the old way of thinking will come back.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what's the old way of thinking? Not forgiving relationships.
Right.
Not forgiving yourself in those past relationships, and not forgiving others in those past relationships.
And then if I really get that basically I just need to change my mind, then, you know, then that means that there's not any situation that I'm in right now that couldn't be perceived in a more peaceful, happy way.
That's right.
Right where I am.
Exactly.
Right now. So
That's
therefore,
right.
he's not even requesting that I make a big change in my outside situation. You know, which is going to be much more complicated actually than changing my mind.
No, that's right. Exactly. You know? And correcting your previous relationship mistakes is as easy as going, are you willing to see them differently?
That's it.
You know, are you willing to see your mom and your dad and you know who and all your previous relationships differently? Are you willing? You know, and if you say, yes, I am, well then now that is forgiveness.
That is forgiveness.
Because
that's right.
Your higher mind will answer that willingness immediately. And say, I thought you'd never ask.
And then I mustn't forget, he said, one thing I really want you to remember is that you're not where you are by accident.
Yeah.
I'm not where I am by accident. I'm not with anybody that I'm with by accident.
Right.
I'm not living where I am by accident. There's nothing about my life that's happening by accident.
And none of those previous relationships were an accident. And to me, that's another basis of forgiveness of all the previous relationships. You know, they weren't an accident. There was something there to learn.
Right.
It was important, it was valuable, and it was useful for what you needed to learn. That's
right.
Forgiveness.
That's forgiveness.
That's forgiveness.
That's forgiveness.
Yeah.
That's
because
forgiveness.
The grievance is something happened in that relationship that I didn't ask for, that was done to me, that didn't have anything to do with, and it wasn't useful to me at all. That's the dark cornerstones of unforgiveness.
Hey.
Sorry to bring that up again. So glad you have on your Africa shirt.
I am dark cornerstone.
Perfect. Where's your cape?
All I need is a cape.
Oh, you need a big rock around your neck.
I need a noose.
Yes, and a rock.
I need a noose and
big
a rock.
Cornerstone.
That's right.
Here's this cornerstone right here.
That's right. The dark cornerstone.
Yeah, cornerstone bling.
That's right. My cornerstone bling.
That's a rapper name.
That's another religion. Hey, you can't say that. I just said it.
Oh, okay, right. Sorry.
Hey.
Oops.
Hey.
Don't write me, y'all.
That's right.
Please
That's
forgive
right.
that previous relationship mistake that you just made.
That's right. If you notice, I'm laughing. As long as I'm laughing, it means I got the correct perception of whatever's going on.
That's right.
I don't care what I say. What she says. If I'm laughing, she's all right.
That's right.
So, you cover the next paragraph
I
for
will.
me. See what I can hear out of it.
All right.
Okay.
As us, the teachers of truth, advance in our training,
Yes.
we learn one lesson with increasing thoroughness. And that is, we do not make our own decisions. And what does that mean? That means we ask our teacher for our teacher's answer, and it's our teacher's answer we follow as our guide for action. Doing that becomes easier and easier as we learn to give up our own judgment. The giving up of our own judgment, which is the obvious prerequisite for hearing God's voice, is usually a fairly slow process. Here we go again with the slow process.
Yes.
In other words, we're slow learners. I think that's what it's trying to tell us here in a nice way.
In a very fairly
In
slow
a very nice way.
Fairly slow process.
Yes. a slowly evolving learning process, a fairly slow process. It says the giving up of our own judgment is usually a fairly slow process for us, not because the giving up of our own judgment is difficult, but because it's apt to be perceived by us as personally insulting.
That's right.
Ain't that's right?
Asking me not to use my judgment.
Please. Don't you know I'm educated?
I know everything.
I know everything about everybody. All right. And as a matter of fact, the world's training is directed toward achieving a goal in direct opposition to that of our curriculum. How is that? Well, the world trains for reliance on one's own judgment as the criterion for maturity and strength. Our curriculum trains for the relinquishment of judgment as the necessary condition of liberation and freedom.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So what did I just hear? I just heard that as I advance in my training in correct perception,
Yes.
I'm going to learn one thing more and more and more. So actually advancing means that I learn one thing more and more and more thoroughly.
That's right.
Which is I don't make my own decisions. So the more
That's
advanced,
right.
I heard him say, the more advanced I become, the less I'll make my own decisions. And the way that I won't make my own decisions is by asking my inner teacher
Yes.
for its answer, and then I'll do what I'm told.
Right.
So I don't make my own decision. I ask the higher self, the Holy Spirit, the higher power, the right mind, what to do, and then I do it.
Yeah.
I follow it as my guide
That's the training program.
for action. That's my training. More and more and more, I don't make my own decisions. I'm being trained not to make my own decisions
Yes.
by being told to ask the Holy Spirit for its guidance and for the answer, and then I follow it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, is that what you learned from your parents or school?
To not make my own decisions is not what I learned.
Oh, right. Yes.
And to turn to something else
It's
for
not what you
guidance is
learned.
not what I learned. Okay,
What
so
did you
this
learn?
might work.
Okay.
This
Yes.
might work. And then he says, now how can I make it easier and easier for me not to make my own decisions and listen
Yeah.
to my guide and then do
Please
what my
tell me.
guide says? As I learn to give up my own judgment, it will become easier because I'll recognize that giving up my judgments, my evaluations, is what I have to do before I can even hear the voice of God, before I can even hear the voice of guidance. I have to give up my own judgment. And that takes some time. He
Yeah,
told me that that would be a
slow.
fairly slow process, giving up my own personal evaluations and analyzations of
Yes.
everything that's going on. It's not that it's hard to give up my judgment.
No.
It's just that I'm so invested in using my own
Right.
judgment that I think it's insulting asking me not to use my judgment. Okay.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay. Then I heard him tell me that the training of the world is directed toward a goal that's entirely directly opposite to what the Course in Miracles is teaching. The world is teaching me something that's diametrically opposite to what the Course in Miracles is teaching me. The world is teaching me to rely on my own ego, my own judgment as the criterion for my maturity
Yes.
and my strength. I'm mature if I just rely on my own judgment without
Yes.
using God's judgment.
And never asking.
And never asking.
Never asking.
And I also heard that the Course in Miracles, though, is training me to relinquish my judgment, my evaluations based on separation, based on my ego, based on fear, based on the past as a necessary condition of my salvation, of my happiness, and of my healing.
Yes.
So that's what I heard in that
Oh,
paragraph.
yeah. Wow. Yeah, so the World's training program and the Course in Miracles training program are the exact opposite.
Right. Right.
Right. And that's why it takes us a long time.
And so it's taken me a long time because it's insulting to me to believe that I'm being asked not to use my judgment. That's what
Exactly.
makes it take a long time. It takes a long time for me to get to the point
Use my
that I
judgment.
don't make decisions by myself with
Right.
increasing frequency.
Yes,
Okay.
I like that definition of not using your own judgment. It means not making decisions by yourself
Right.
with increasing thoroughness.
Right.
You know,
Right.
asking before you decide.
Now, those of you who are sharing this with us, if you'll notice that as Anna and I go through this, what we're doing is remembering what it is saying to us. If you notice, you don't see us spending any time with each other analyzing what the Course is saying.
No.
we don't try to break it down. We don't try to, as much as we can, we try not to project our definitions and our judgments, just what it's asking for us not to do, onto the material, and that makes it a lot easier. That's what makes it fast. It's going to be as fast as I'm willing to not feel like I'm being insulted, to be told to ask for God's intelligence as opposed to mine. Wow.
I like hearing what is required if I wanted to speed things up.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, if I'm feeling a little frustrated with how slow good change seems to be happening, I just heard of the way to pick it up.
That's right.
You know, stop making decisions by myself first before I ask for a higher intelligence to decide for me.
Ooh.
That will speed things up.
That will speed things up.
For the better.
So then the next section is called How is Judgment Relinquished? How is it relinquished? Like, okay, I have to relinquish my judgment. How do I do it? Okay, so judgment, like other devices by which the world of illusions is maintained, is totally misunderstood by the world. Judgment is totally misunderstood by the world.
Yes, it is.
In the world, judgment is actually confused with wisdom and substitutes for truth. As the world uses the term judgment, an individual is capable of good and bad judgment.
Yes.
And his education aims at strengthening the former, the good judgment, and minimizing the latter, the bad judgment. There is, however, considerable confusion about what these categories of good judgment and bad judgment means. What is good judgment to one is bad judgment to another. Further, even the same person classifies the same action as showing good judgment at one time and bad judgment at another time. Nor can any consistent criteria for determining what these categories of good and bad judgment are be really taught.
That's right.
In other words, at any time the student may disagree with what his would-be teacher says about good and bad judgment, and the teacher himself may well be inconsistent on what he believes good judgment in these terms does not mean anything.
All right.
No more does bad judgment. All right.
Okay.
Okay, darling.
Good judgment and bad. Good versus bad judgment.
Good versus bad judgment.
Dun, dun, dun.
And how is it relinquished?
And how do you relinquish both?
Is that how you relinquish good judgment and bad judgment? Oh, I thought it was about relinquishing bad judgment.
Right.
But
that's right. Actually.
He said I need to relinquish my idea of good judgment.
Exactly, because obviously my idea of good judgment, may be suspect.
That's right. So tell me what you heard there,
Kujawa.
Kujawa.
I'll tell you what I heard. Okay, so judgment is totally misunderstood by the world. Okay, the world has no idea what judgment is or should be. The world is totally confused about what judgment is. And the reason we know that is because in the world, judgment is confused with wisdom. That's how we know that the world does not understand judgment. And not only that, but we know that the world misunderstands judgment because in the world, judgment substitutes for truth. So we've let judgment substitute for truth, and we have confused judgment with wisdom. I am judging you, I am so wise. All right. As the world uses the term of judgment, an individual is capable of, quote, good and bad judgment. And our education in the world aims at strengthening your good judgment and minimizing bad judgment. But the terms good and bad judgment are totally subjective.
I hear
completely subjective. There's no constancy. There's no real consistency in good and bad judgment. Depending on what I'm experiencing from one situation to another, good and bad judgment change in my judgment. And what was the other one that and one situation is says, let me read that.
You could classify the same action as showing good
the same
judgment.
action.
The same
right,
action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's totally subjective, which means it's meaningless. If there's no core, consistent truth that applies to everyone
That's right.
and everything at all times, then it's not real, it's not consistent, it's not honest. It says, so in other words, what it's saying is that there's no consistent criteria for determining what the categories good judgment and bad judgment mean. And nor can that criteria be taught in this world. So there's nothing in the world that can teach you, here is what good judgment is all the time, and here is what bad judgment is all the time. No one can teach that solid criteria, that consistent criteria. And because of that, a student may disagree with their would-be teacher about what good and bad judgment is. And the teacher himself may be inconsistent about what good and bad judgment is. So in this world, the world doesn't know what judgment is. And so the whole conversation about what good and bad judgment is and how to learn what that is and what it means is useless, basically speaking. Now, the world's curriculum is all about making better judgments and minimizing bad judgment. And that is completely meaningless because the world doesn't even know what good and bad judgment is. So that's why the giving up of judgment is the basis of this curriculum, and the basis of our training program is not what is good judgment, what is bad judgment, just what will it take for me to give up my judgment so that I can hear the voice for truth telling me what to do that would produce peace and joy and abundance. That's what I heard.
All right. Sounds like you heard a lot.
All right.
All right. Okay. So, you want to read to me?
I sure do. It says, the so-called good judgment in these terms doesn't mean anything. No more does so-called bad judgment. And it's necessary for us to realize not that we shouldn't judge, but that we cannot judge. And so, in giving up judgment, we're merely giving up what we did not have. In other words, we're just giving up an illusion. Or better, we just have an illusion of giving up. What's really happened is we've actually merely become more honest. Realizing that we can't judge is becoming honest. Recognizing that judgment was always impossible for us, we no longer attempt judgment. No longer attempting judgment is no sacrifice. Really? It's no sacrifice. Our teacher has to tell us that. It's not a sacrifice. It's not a loss. On the contrary, when we give up judgment, we put ourselves in a position where judgment through us rather than by us can occur. And this judgment through us is neither good nor bad. It's the only judgment there is. And this judgment is only one, and that judgment is this: you are guiltless, and sin does not exist.
All right. Okay. Okay, so I've heard it's necessary for me to realize that it's not that I shouldn't judge, it's that I can't judge. I can't judge, I can't judge, I can't judge, I can't judge, because I'll give up something I can't do.
That's right, and that's not a sacrifice.
And that's not a sacrifice for me to give up judgment because I can't judge. And then, so I'm really giving up a right that I never really had in the first place. I'm really giving up a role or a function I never had in the first place.
Right.
And my function isn't to judge.
Right.
Okay, so I'm really just having the illusion of giving up something that I really never had in the first place, which was the function of judging and judgment.
Yes.
So now, since I'm not doing something that's really not my function in the first place, now I'm being more honest.
Right.
Because I realize that it's impossible for me to judge, then I stop attempting it.
Yes.
Then I have to recognize that that's not a sacrifice to give up a function I never had in the first place, which is, it's not my right, it's not my function, it's not my place to judge, because I don't really know enough to judge.
That's right.
Okay, then he says, now the minute I stop judging, then it puts me in a position that God can use me. It puts me in the position that truth can use me by judging through me. So now God's going to use me to give the true judgment. And the true judgment isn't bad. The true judgment isn't good. The true judgment isn't bad according to my standards. The true judgment isn't good according to my standards and the world's standards. It's the only judgment there is, which is that I'm going to be giving the message out that God's son, God's child, you are innocent, and there's no such thing as sin. The judgment that God wants to come through me is that You're innocent.
Yes.
Everyone's innocent, and there's no such thing as sin.
Which
There's no
is-
way we can violate
Yes.
the laws of God
Exactly.
and succeed.
And there's
in
no
doing
way
it.
you could make a mistake that could not be
And
corrected.
which is what a sin would be.
That's
It would
what
be a
sin would
mistake
be.
beyond something that God could correct to heal.
Exactly.
So I just want to be used to give the message of innocence and guiltlessness.
Yes.
That's when I'm being used as a vehicle and a conduit for judgment, the right judgment, the true judgment,
Yes.
the only judgment to come through me.
Exactly.
That's what I heard.
Exactly. I like that. And I don't have to figure anything out because it's only one judgment.
So it's nothing for me to figure
I
out.
don't have to analyze each situation separately to determine what it means. You know, what's the correct judgment of this situation or relationship, because it's just one.
No matter what I'm looking at, the answer is the same.
The right judgment is the same.
The right judgment is the same. God's Son is guiltless and sin doesn't exist, which is saying the extension of love is innocence. We are extensions of love and we're innocent, and there is no mistake that could not be corrected by God that exists.
And unless that is the only judgment coming through you, you know that you are relying on your own judgment.
That's how you know.
And you will be wrong, and you will be making relationship mistakes, and you will be slowing yourself down.
And you'll be creating dark cornerstones of unforgiveness.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Even if you're white. Because I am the dark corner.
That's right.
We both equal in our darkness.
That's right.
That's
Okay.
right. When it comes to grievances.
All right. Well, you equalized that
That's
one.
right. That's right.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
So there is no good or bad judgment.
Yes.
There's only one right judgment.
And it's not good or bad.
And it's not a good or bad. It's not, that's good, that's bad. It's, you are innocent, you are guiltless, and there's no mistake that you can make that couldn't be corrected.
Which is the same as saying sin does not exist.
Exactly.
Okay.
All
So
right.
the aim of our curriculum, unlike the goal of the world's learning, is the recognition that judgment in the usual sense is impossible. Judgment in the usual sense is impossible.
Right.
This is not an opinion.
Okay.
That judgment in the usual sense is impossible.
All right.
It's a fact.
Okay.
All right. In order to judge anything rightly,
Right.
one would have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, things present, and things to come. That means one would have to recognize in advance all the effects of his judgments on everyone and everything involved in his judgments in any way. I would have to
Wow.
recognize in advance all the effects of my judgments on everyone and everything involved in my judgments
Oh, okay.
in any way.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
no one, and one would have to be certain
Yes.
that there is no distortion in his perception. One would have to be certain there is no distortion in his perception. One would have to be certain there is no
Yes.
distortion in his perception, so that his judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom the judgment rests now and in the future.
Ah.
Who is in a position to do this? To do what? To be sure that there is no distortion
Yes.
in their perception, so that their judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and in the future.
Right.
Who, except in grandiose fantasies,
Yes.
could claim this for themselves?
Right.
What? That there's no distortion in their perception, so that their judgment would be wholly fair to everyone on whom it rests now and in the future. Who, except
Yes.
in grandiose fantasies, would claim this for himself?
Yes, and by that criteria, who here is engaged in some grandiose fantasies? Right, because that's what judgment is.
A grandiose, not a regular fantasy. But judgment is a
It's a
grandiose fantasy.
Fantasy. Wow, every time you judge, oh, I know enough about this situation. I know an inconceivably wide range of things related to this, and I know the effects of my judgment on this and everyone involved now and in the future enough to judge accurately as to what it means. Wow.
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 Wow. Talking about arrogance.
Wow. All of a sudden I just felt completely like, you know, a total narcissistic arrogance. But when you really see or hear that that's what is entailed in judgment, then you will be relinquishing your judgment. When you realize just how grandiosely deluded you have to be be judging on your own, then it'll be easier to give it up. So that's what we got to do. So what I heard was the goal of this curriculum, which is opposite to the world's, is the recognition that judgment, as I typically do it, is impossible. You know, I can't judge, and that's not an opinion, that's a fact. And the reason that is to judge anything myself. Here's what would be required for me to make a good judgment, a right judgment on anything. I'd have to be fully aware of an inconceivably wide range of things, past, present, and to come, about this thing that I'm judging. And I'd have to know its past. I'd have to know its future. I'd have to know everything about its current. I'd have to know everything about its past and everything about its current, future, and everything about it now. That is what it would take for me to make a right judgment on anything. Okay? And then I would also have to recognize the effects of my judgment on that now, past, and in future. Okay? And I would also have to know the effects of my judgment on everyone involved in that situation. Alrighty.
Okay.
Now, is there anybody who could claim to have that kind of knowledge? Is there anybody who could claim to have that kind of awareness of the thing that they are judging? Wow.
You have to know everything about the past, everything about its present, and you'd also have to be able to predict everything that was going to happen in its future.
Yeah, and then we could talk about that in terms of people. If you were going to judge somebody, you know how we judge people. We call it having an opinion or observing. But to judge somebody and go, well, this is the truth about them. This is the way they are. And this is what's happening with them. To make a judgment like that, you would have to know all of their past. You would have to know everything about their present. And you would have to know everything about their future. And you would have to know everything about the effects of your judgment on that person and everyone they're in relationship with now and in the future.
Oh, of course.
Sure. No problem. I know everything.
I know everything. That's all you're saying.
You're basically saying, I know everything. When you are making a judgment, when you're assessing, it says when you're assuming the right to assess their reality as you see fit, that's what you're doing.
You said, I know everything.
I know everything, and now I'm going to judge them. That is what is entailed in judgment. All right.
And what else would you have to be
And you'd also have to be grandiosely deluded.
And no distortion in your perception.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's right. And no distortion in my perception at all. Yes. I've never had a day where I didn't have some distortion in my perception.
Because, okay. So what else did you hear?
All right. I think that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. That's okay. So far, it's really obliterating my justification for judgment, though, in a way that there's something about doing this with you, not trying to analyze it, just trying to remember and being willing to get out of denial and be honest.
Absolutely.
That does make you really move faster because you really do not see the sacrifice of giving up your judgment because you see it's not fair.
Exactly. You see it's not fair.
It's not fair.
And you see it's arrogant.
Yeah.
It's ultimately arrogant.
Yeah.
When you see something is ultimately arrogant and you don't want to be that way, then it's easy to give it up. And, you know, I look forward to the increasing freedom that comes from giving up my own judgment. The increasing freedom of having to carry that load that, you know.
I love how he says, what was that? I saw that. When he says, he talked about earlier how your judgment actually rests on someone.
Yes.
And I could actually see it as like smashing someone.
Exactly.
I got a visual on that.
And he also talks about, he says, you have no idea of the release and deep peace, the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from taking the burden of judgment off your own back.
Yeah. All
of a sudden, we don't realize that we're walking around like this with a heavy burden on our back, and that's our judgments. And that when we decide that we don't want to judge anymore, then that burden comes off of our back, and we can stand back upright and, feel like we're floating or being carried, instead of carrying a heavy burden. And if you're someone like me who, whose neck and shoulder hurt sometimes, then you may be somebody who's carrying a load of judgment.
A load of burden.
A load of burden.
You carry a load of burden. Can I deliver it to you?
Yes, that's right. If you love me,
you
take my burden of judgment.
That burden of judgment.
You let me judge you. Let me be right occasionally.
And if you listen to the Holy Spirit, you're using judgment.
Oh.
You get it, judgment?
Oh, yes.
Use the Holy Spirit judgment.
I like it.
That's good. That's good.
That's good.
That's good. You know that's good.
That's good.
That's right.
I gave him one thumbs up. We're the Siskel and Ebert of A Course in Miracles. Except all we do is agree.
That's right.
I agree.
That's right.
I agree with you.
That's right.
I agree with
well,
you.
what did you think about that movie, Anna? Well, I thought everybody was innocent in that movie and no sin existed in it. What was your judgment of that movie, Anna?
I also saw that everyone in it was innocent and that no sin exists.
Well, that's 2 thumbs up.
That would be a one-show run.
That's right. We'd be the most boring critics people ever seen.
Those critics say the same thing
about every movie.
Every week. They have the same criticism.
It's the least popular show on television.
Those guys agree. Boring.
Boring. It's a trip. Yeah, God. Well, we're not making our own decision about the movie, you understand. We're just allowing judgment to be done through us.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. All right. So now I'm going to read to you.
Yes.
Remember how many times you thought you knew all the so-called facts you needed for judgment and how wrong you were?
Hey.
Remember?
Hey.
Remember? Okay. I do. Okay.
Hey.
Sorry. I have my list right here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me remember everything I've ever done wrong. That's what a great relationship.
All the times you thought you were right, but you were wrong.
That's right.
Here
You got
it
it
is.
listed.
I wrote it down.
Okay. You even got it in the cloud.
Honey, I put it in my external hard drive, honey. All right. My judgment cloud.
That's right.
All right. So he's asking us a question. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? And would you even know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? Now, why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment. Wisdom is the relinquishment of judgment. So then make just one more judgment. Just one more. That's one more judgment. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I was about to go through withdrawals.
I need
at least I get one more judgment.
Let me have at least one more.
One more judgment. All right. Okay, before I go cold turkey here. Here's your one more judgment that you can make. It is this. There is someone with you whose judgment is perfect. There is someone with you whose judgment is perfect. This someone does know all the facts, past, present, and to come. This one does know all the effects of their judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And this one who is with you is wholly fair, completely fair to everyone. Why? Because there's no distortion in this one's perception. Okay. This one that is with you.
Okay. So what I heard was that that I should remember how many times that I thought I knew everything I needed to judge the situation and how wrong I was. That there's not nobody that hasn't had the experience of thinking they knew what was going on and they didn't.
That's right.
And I also heard him say, how many times have I thought I was right and then never even recognized that I was wrong?
That's right.
And so why would I want to use that for the basis of decision making? Since I don't really know what's right and I really don't know what's wrong.
Wow.
Then I heard him tell me I'm really smart if I don't judge, and that wisdom is the relinquishment of judgment.
Right.
So being smart, being wise is not judgment. Being wise is letting go of my judgment.
Right.
And then, but then it's okay for me to make one more judgment, and the one more judgment I need to make is that there's a higher power and an inner guide with me who does have judgment that's completely perfect.
Yes.
That there is a power that's with me, and an intelligence and a love and a truth that's with me, that does know everything that's going to happen in the past, that happened in the past, that's happening now, and it's going to happen in the future. And that there's a part of me, an inner teacher, that does know the effects of its judgment on everyone and everything involved in any way. And that there is someone with me who is totally fair
Yes.
to everyone. And the reason why this part of me, that's the higher self, is totally fair to everyone is because there's no distortion in the Holy Spirit's perception.
Right.
And when you don't have a distortion in perception, that's when you're totally fair to everyone.
Right. Exactly. So it's not necessarily that I have to give up. All I have to do is give up my judgment. I can still keep judgment. It's just someone else's. It's the higher mind's judgment.
I need to use my right mind's judgment, the Holy Spirit's judgment.
Right, exactly.
Right, and know that I'm not alone, and that part of me, called the Holy Spirit, that part of me does have accurate, fair perception.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that's so good to know that there's someone with me and in me that has accurate and fair perception all the time.
All the time.
And yes.
All the time.
Whew.
Yeah, that's relaxing.
That's very relaxing.
That's very relaxing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, therefore, lay judgment down, not with regret, but with a sigh of gratitude. Lay judgment down. Now are you free of a burden so great, judgment, that you could merely stagger and fall down beneath that burden of judgment.
Yes.
And it was all illusion, nothing more. Now can you, the teacher of God, rise up unburdened and walk lightly on. Yet it is not only rising up and walking lightly on that is your benefit. The teacher of God's sense of care is gone, for the teacher of God has no care. The teacher of God is giving care away along with judgment. The teacher of God gave himself to God, whose judgment he has chosen now to trust instead of his own. Now the teacher of God makes no mistakes. His guide is sure. And where the teacher of God came to judge, now the teacher of God comes to bless. Where now the teacher of God laughs, the teacher of God used to come to weep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we were talking about, how judgment is really, when you see what you would have, the kind of arrogance that you have to judge, you really do see how it is a burden that we are staggering beneath, falling down under. And that when you see it like that, then you let go of judgment. What's the word he said? You lay it down, not with regret, but with relief, a sigh of gratitude, right? Because now you've unburdened yourself from a burden that was so heavy that you are staggering beneath it. And all that burden you were carrying on your back and staggering beneath, it was all wrong. It was all an illusion. It was all totally meaningless. All those judgments I was suffering and carrying the heavy burden of for years and years, it was for nothing. It was meaningless because I didn't know enough to make a judgment. It was all illusion and nothing more. Now that I recognize that and I lay that burden of judgment down, now I can rise up and walk lightly on. I love that. I want to rise up and walk lightly on. And what does that mean, to rise up and walk lightly on? That I have no cares. I'm not full of care, concern, worry. My sense of care is gone. I really could use some of that.
I could definitely stop being concerned about stuff all the time. Stop worrying.
I could use some freedom from care and concern and worry. Because when he says care, it's not like, oh, I care. It's, oh my God, I'm concerned, I'm worried.
Yeah. It's reflecting fear and the lack of faith.
Exactly.
That form of care.
Yes. And so the idea of not having that kind of care and concern and worry burdening me all the time, every day, I would love that. That's what I want.
That's what you want.
Now I'm hearing how to have that.
And I'm joining you with that. I'd like to have it too.
I gave away that sense of care and worry and concern burden that I was carrying. I gave it away when I stopped judging by myself. Whew. This is what I want to have right here. I gave away my judgment, which is how I gave away my concern and worry and my care. I like that. And when I gave away my judgment, I then gave myself to, I gave myself to the one whose judgment I've chosen now to trust instead of my own. I like that. I gave up my judgment, my own judgment, and then I gave myself to the one whose judgment is correct. Now that I've done that, I'm not going to make mistakes. Okay. Can't even imagine that. That sounds good. I'm not making mistakes anymore because my guide is sure.
That's why you're not making mistakes.
Exactly.
Because your guide doesn't make mistakes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And my guide doesn't make mistakes because there's no distortion in my guide's perception. So now I'm not mistaken. Right on. And now that I've done all that and all that's happened for me, now in the place where I used to come and analyze and judge and assess, now I just come to bless. You are innocent. Your mistakes, there's no mistake that you make that couldn't be corrected, and you're entitled to the correction of your mistakes. And that's not a sin, it's just a mistake, and you are innocent. You don't need to feel guilty.
Oh, you mean where I used to cry, I could laugh?
And now where I used to cry, now we're laughing. Because I like that, so that I don't have the judgment anymore of appearing intelligent, appearing like I know what I'm doing, appearing like I know what everything means. Now, my only purpose is just to bless. When I come into a situation, it's not to seem intelligent and to know what to do all the time for everyone. It's just to bless. I'm only here to bless. To tell people that they are innocent, and they're innocent because there's no mistake they could have made that can't be corrected by giving up judgment.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. We're down to the last paragraph.
That's right. So, it's not difficult to relinquish judgment, period. It is not difficult. But it is difficult indeed to try to keep judgment. And so we, the teachers of truth and love, lay judgment down happily the instant we recognize judgment's cost. All of the ugliness we see, all about us, is judgment's outcome. All of the pain we look on around us is the result of judgment. All of the loneliness and the sense of loss, the sense of passing time, the sense of growing hopelessness and sickening despair, and not only that, but fear of death, all those also have come of judgment. And now we know that all these things, the loss, the death, the growing hopelessness, sickening despair, and fear of death, all those things, he says, need not be. Now we know they need not be. The reason is because not one of them is true, because we have given up their cause, and those things which never were but the effects of our mistaken choice, have fallen from us. We, the teacher of truth and love, you, us, this step will bring you peace. Can it be difficult to want only peace?
All right.
It's so hard to want only peace.
All right. So hard. So hard.
So hard. It's so hard to want only peace.
Oh, what a sacrifice. You just want me to have peace.
What a sacrifice.
Well, I heard that it's not hard to let go of judgment. I heard that it's hard to keep it.
Yes.
I heard that I'll let go of judgment as soon as I recognize what it's costing me in terms of my own happiness.
Right.
I heard him say that everything in the world that I see that's ugly is coming from judgment. That every pain that I look at is coming from judgment. I heard him say every time I feel lonely, in the sense of loss, I see in the sense of time passing, it's coming from judgment. In the sense of my hopelessness growing, is coming from judgment. My despair, my fear of death is coming from judgment. All of it's come from judgment. And that I'll let it go the once I get that there's no benefit to me in it. There's no benefit to me in it. I'll let it go. All the pain, sorrow, and suffering that I see is coming from judgment.
And all the loneliness, all the sickening despair, all the growing hopelessness.
The fear of dying.
The fear of dying.
It's all coming from judging. Then I heard the Course in Miracles tell me, the voice with the Course, tell me that now I know that all the pain and suffering doesn't have to happen.
Yeah,
all the pain and suffering I go through doesn't have to happen. I never have to go through pain and suffering. I never have to go through pain and suffering. I never have to go through pain and suffering if I recognize it as judgment that's causing me and everyone else to go through pain and suffering.
Wow. That makes me want to relinquish judgment.
Right.
I mean, not with any sense of sacrifice, but I want to give it up, and I want to give it up now. Like, that's all I want.
Not one of these things are true. And I also heard the voice for the Course tell me that I've given up the cause of all the pain, which is judgment, and that all of that suffering was just the result of my own mistaken choice to judge.
Yes.
And I also heard that has fallen from me.
Yes.
All that stuff falls from me.
Yes.
It'll just fall out of my life.
I love it.
The pain and suffering and sorrow and loneliness and death will just fall out of my life.
I love that.
The once I realized that it's just coming from a mistaken choice, which is thinking that, see, I'm trying to sneak. See, that came from judgment. That's coming from this. I want you to know that was a judgment sneeze. That was a judgment sneeze. That's what it was. So that's just letting you know right there. I was giving you a living demonstration of what happens when you judge. You sneeze through your video. Okay. And so so I'm being asked, teacher of God, teacher of love. I was being told this step, relinquishing judgment, will bring me peace.
Yes.
And how could it be difficult to just want peace
yes.
and fulfillment?
Exactly.
That's what I heard it say. That takes us perfect. We right on time, 1 hour perfectly.
Perfect.
And so listen to this many, many times. I got so much out of this. I get so much out of going through this with you. I really feel like I've really realized that relinquishing judgment at another level is something that I could do, and it really benefits me.
Exactly.
So I'm successfully doing my slowly evolving training program. I've only been hearing that for 34 years. So I'm successful in that.
Yes, you are.
And so I want to tell you I feel good about myself and knowing that there's someone with me who does have correct perception.
Yes, they do.
That I can always count on.
Yes.
I have a correct perception of you.
Yes, you do.
As being innocent and beautiful and brilliant and creative and powerful and an excellent teacher and student of the Course.
And I appreciate that you've always seen my mistakes as easily correctable.
That's right. That's right.
And that has been a priceless gift that you have given me.
Thank you. I will continue to do it. I see the benefits of not judging you even more now after reading this, and you too. So I'm Earl Purdy. You can go to my website, earlpurdy.com, and I have literally hundreds of classes online of the Course in Miracles. And you can check those out, and those are freely available to you to check out. I'm also available for personal one-on-one healing sessions called Clarity Sessions, where we take all of this in the Course and we bring it to whatever situation or circumstance that you're dealing with to see if we can look at it another way that will get rid of the unforgiveness and the blocks to your peace and your joy and your happiness. And so this is available. Go to my website. It explains it in detail, earlpurdy.com.
Amen. And you can also find my classes on YouTube. You go to Anna Kujawa, and you can find all my classes and my Course in Miracles readings and my meditations that I do before each class, all on YouTube. Just put my name in.
I'm on YouTube too.
That's right. And if you would like to learn about my holistic counseling practice, I also do one-on-one healing sessions, and those are called Miracle Psychotherapeutic Sessions. And same thing, you take these ideas and apply them to whatever you're going through so that you can have a transformation miracle that you are entitled to. And you can learn about those or schedule one at annakujawa.com.
All right. So we're gonna have one judgment as we finish for all of you all, and that's that you're innocent.
Yes.
And no mistakes that you've ever made are beyond correction.
Yes.
All right.
That's the truth.
We love you.
Love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.